Hello, and welcome to my video on neoliberalism. For no reason in particular, it will begin with a 3-minute ad for an e-cigarette. So I got these Vaporesso vapes in the mail, the Vaporesso Extra over here. And then we got this bigger one, nice colors. You press it 5 times to turn it on, this big button over here. And then it powers on. You can set the wattage to whatever you want, and then you just hold this down. It heats it up. You get some big smokes. If you want to change the mode, click the middle button 3 times. You got yourself pulse mode, power eco, that saves the battery, smart TC, do-it-yourself mode. You can change all the different settings with this one. It's especially cool if you're under the age of 21.
You know, I've been thinking recently, what if we replaced all of the oxygen with vape juice?
So I've actually organized cigarettes and vaping along a line of how bad things are for you. So cigarettes are over here, that means they're pretty bad for you, but vaping is over here, which means it's less bad for you than cigarettes. So as you can see, vaping is great. Oh dear, it appears I invested my sponsorship money in a wide-angle lens.
I just can't stop. Yes, it's good. Vaping, I love vaping.
A teen in Canada may be the first person to develop popcorn lung due to vaping, according to a new report.
You know what? I've decided I don't want to breathe air anymore. I'm only going to breathe e-juice from now on. Yes, this is the healthy way to live my life.
The teen was previously healthy, but reported that he had vaped every day for the last 5 months.
I'm feeling like a restriction in my heart area.
Changes your voice when you're trying to speak.
I'm just gonna say it.
This is worth ruining your lungs for.
Just put your own tank on it and follow the navigation. Click yes or no. That's easy.
This is how manly I sound when I'm on vape juice. Try it, kids. You're missing out on a great opportunity to impress your friends. You want to impress your friends? Then go out and buy the Vaporesso Gen S. Ah, yes, I love my Vaporesso Gen S. My Vaporesso Gen S is the only thing that makes me happy anymore. I wake up in a cold sweat. The only thing I can think of is Vaporesso Gen S.
You know, I wish I started this earlier, like 16, 15.
Oh man, I would have been the coolest kid in my class.
I could die. What would become of me? Just dirt, really.
Just dirt. If you are under 18, you need to buy this product. I only age restricted the video to look good. I'm telling you, if you somehow bypass that, you need to go out, grab your parents' credit card,
And actually don't. Don't even do it post-ironically. If you're under 18 and you're still watching this video, please navigate away from the page. I know that's not going to actually do anything. No 17-year-old listens to an like someone say, "Oh, if you're under 18, you got to leave," and then leaves. They're 17. Their brain is like, you know, they're interested in things. Telling them that they should navigate away is just going to make them watch it even more. So I don't even know what you should say in this situation. I guess just not accept the e-cigarette ad in the first place.
People often tell me, Greg, don't you feel like this anti-centrism joke has gone on for a little too long? To which I would say, joke? If we're gonna destroy the status quo, we kind of have to first define what it is. That's a tricky thing to do, though. Every country has technically their own status quo, with their own ideology associated with that status quo. For example, here in Canada, technically the political philosophy we subscribe to is something called the third way, which is like third positionism, but like the centrist version, which is unfathomably lame. It's the attempt to reconcile left-wing and right-wing political positions, and you're like, ooh, interesting, tell me more, and then it says center-left and center-right-wing political positions, and you're like, why am I Canadian? But like I said, every single country has its own status quo to rebel against. An anti-centrist in one country might be slightly less of an anti-centrist in another country. For example, in China, the political ideology that is the status quo is socialism with Chinese characteristics. And if you lived in the States, then the status quo would be, enough of these normie takes. What is widely regarded to be the status quo in the West is something called neoliberalism. To be clear, I've never read a single primary source about neoliberalism. I don't even have the attention span to read past the first 3 paragraphs of the Wikipedia article. And when I and other extremists say neoliberalism, really, we're just referring to all liberalism, all centrism, that kind of broad generalization. Anti-intellectualism is cool and good, and if you know how to harness it, you can get 200,000 subscribers, like me! The general idea, really all you need to know, is that corporations should be allowed to run society for the most part. And then there's a state to step in and enforce things so that every individual can be protected and have some rights. So here's how I would describe neoliberalism, okay? First, an economic axis. Communism on one end, full capitalism on the other end. It leans towards full capitalism. It's probably like a moderate right to right-wing economic ideology. Neoliberalism is culturally left-wing because it allows all these different identity groups to become commodified within capitalism. If you want to have a new gender identity, capitalism is basically okay with that as long as it can sell you a nice little new gender identity pin. Neoliberalism, of course, also has a state. It uses that state to reinforce individuals' rights, but mainly the state is there, again, because everything is revolving around the economically right-wing nature of the ideology. The state is there to also protect corporations. So if someone wants to break into a corporation, police can come and apprehend that person and keep the corporation intact and keep capitalism flowing. And then, of course, we have globalism versus nationalism, and it is more of a globalist ideology. And in fact, it's sometimes a extremely globalist ideology. A lot of neoliberals joke about, like, if neoliberalism is the status quo, where's my open borders? So those kinds of people, they want as much free trade, as much open movement as possible. The neoliberal utopia is kind of like a big one-world government where everybody just trades and lives together as one people. So what I'm talking about when I refer to the status quo in the West is I'm talking about all these different Western political philosophies. And when I'm talking about all these different Western political philosophies, the general term that people use to refer to all of them is neoliberalism. That means that every centrist ideology is referred to as being neoliberal, which doesn't really make any sense. So this brings us to the question, are neoliberals centrists? Well, centrism is very nebulous as a term, but if we're going to be describing centrism as dead centrism, which is to say in the center of every political spectrum, we would have a layout sort of like this. And that is kind of close to neoliberalism, and when people talk about neoliberalism, they're also talking about centrism, but it is distinct. It is distinct, at least in terms of these charts. Here's a fun little mental exercise. What's the opposite of a neoliberal? Well, if you take the sliders and you exactly like 180 them, so that they're not extremely extreme, but they're just the opposite end of what they should be. So they're still, so you go from being like, you know, moderate left-wing culturally to being moderate right-wing culturally, and moderate right-wing economically to being moderate left-wing economically. Then you get social nationalism, or maybe national conservatism, something along those lines, an ideology resembling that. If neoliberalism truly was extreme on the cultural and economic axis, then it would be something along the lines of pink capitalism, or black capitalism, or, you know, feminist capitalism, something wacky like that. Well, I mean, I say wacky. The idea of using capitalism as a means of liberation is not that far-fetched. And here's a clip of a Black Lives Matter protester talking about Bitcoin. So pink capitalism, maybe not that far off. The virgin center-left versus center-right versus the Chad Nazbol versus pink capitalism. I'll be honest, the only reason I'm referring to the status quo as neoliberalism is because it's a fun, catchy term that everybody's using nowadays. Neoliberalism, neoliberalism, neoliberalism. Does anybody actually know what it means? Does anybody really know what it means? No. I mean, no one's specifically read the primary sources that define what neoliberalism is. No one wants to pour through all that information. All of our knowledge collectively comes from YouTube videos because none of us have the attention span to actually read a book. We don't even have the attention span to read Wikipedia. I mean, are you going to read Wikipedia? Go ahead. No, read the whole Wikipedia article. Tell me about neoliberalism.
By the way, the reason facts don't matter anymore is because people have certain axiomatic beliefs that are unbudging, and people aren't going to budge on those beliefs, so that no matter what new information comes, those axiomatic beliefs will never change. And certain people have axiomatic beliefs that directly contradict each other, and that's why there's going to be a war within your lifetime.
But here's the thing. People don't use the word neoliberalism to just refer to this exact set of political beliefs. Sometimes they use it to refer to everything that is even similar to this exact set of political beliefs. For example, people are also talking about social democrats and neoconservatives when they're talking about neoliberals, for the most part. Now, the great thing about neoliberalism is that nobody knows what the fuck it means. I just made these spectrums up based off of the comments that I read on Our Neoliberal. When a conservative dunks on a neoliberal, they think it's because they're talking about regular liberals, by which they mean progressives, because the conservative is socially conservative. But to a leftist, a conservative is a liberal, and to a conservative, a leftist is a liberal, and nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about. Everybody's just using different terms and can't agree on what anything means, and the last bastion of the attempt to create an objective reality died with the news industry, and now we're just making shit up. The only solution to this problem is to watch more Dreg videos. But anyway, the point is, most of the countries in the West operate off of a neoliberal framework, which is personal property is protected, capitalism essentially runs society. But what's important to note here is that neoliberalism isn't exactly extreme. It's not a completely capitalist society. You can't literally sell anything. There are restrictions that are put in place to protect the individual's rights, and it's not a completely culturally left-wing society either. People on the far left will say neoliberalism still has institutionalized racism, heteronormativity, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so now we've defined neoliberalism. It's defined by these four spectrums here, at least according to me, and none of those spectrums are very extreme in either direction, except maybe globalism. Now you may say, Dreg, how am I alone on my keyboard going to destroy neoliberalism? It sounds like you're selling me some grand narrative to indoctrinate me into a cult of some kind. But listen up, buddy. You alone on your keyboard are not going to destroy neoliberalism. We alone on our keyboard are going to destroy neoliberalism. In order to destroy neoliberalism, we're going to have to do a joint attack. We're going to have to attack from the far left and the far right simultaneously. Otherwise, extremists will keep bickering against each other and fighting each other while the status quo reinforces itself indefinitely. But it's not just attacks from the far left and right. We also need attacks from the far forward, the far backwards, the far up, and the far down. We are going to need attacks from axes that you don't even know exist yet. Avenues of acceleration have avenues to attack neoliberalism from. Antinatalists and natalists alike can find directions to attack neoliberalism from. It doesn't matter your political ideology. As long as you're not a neoliberal yourself, you can attack neoliberalism. So let's begin. 1. Attacks from the left. The most effective leftist critique of neoliberalism is the critique against capitalism. Bring attention to the people that capitalism leaves behind. Homeless people. People that work minimum wage and get hopelessly stuck in debt. People who the social safety net has failed. The rampant destruction of the environment, and the people that capitalism has turned into greedy monsters. You can also attack neoliberalism from the cultural left. Now, you can do this by both attacking capitalism by saying that capitalism is a racist system, or you can attack the superficial nature of neoliberalism being culturally left, which is to say, people don't actually care about the individual groups and what they're going through. They care about making money off of those groups. You can also argue that these groups are being actively oppressed because the individualistic nature of a neoliberal society makes it so that people can't really form a group identity around being marginalized. Attacks on the right. The most effective critique of neoliberalism from the right is the cultural critique. Essentially, neoliberalism will inevitably sell out your culture. Culture to neoliberalism is just something to be sold. Attacking neoliberalism from the cultural right involves specifically attacking the way in which neoliberalism sells out culture and replaces heritage with bleak consumerism. Now, it may seem weird to attack neoliberalism from the economic right, but what you have to keep in mind is that neoliberalism isn't really that economically right-wing. It's actually more moderately economically right-wing. So if you're an economic far-right extremist, you have really good arguments to be made against the neoliberal world order. The most important thing you have to keep in mind is that neoliberalism isn't really capitalism, it's corporatism. The state still functions with corporations, and it bails out big corporations all the time. In this way, you have to make sure that your critique specifically attacks the way in which neoliberalism is not capitalist enough. Now you may say, Dreg, all of this sounds great, but really what you're describing is just ways you can ideologically attack something. And ideologically attacking an ideology might be cool and all, but it's not actually going to do anything. You're not going to change anything by saying some words. To which I would say, you're probably wrong about that. Neoliberalism isn't the status quo because there's some, grand, omnipresent force controlling everybody's mind to, make them all believe the same thing. It's because Neoliberalism works for most people, or at least has been working for most people. And it's been working for so long that when it starts to fail in some ways, people don't really understand the ways that it's failing, and they just keep believing what they've always believed. Eventually, this world order will end and be replaced with a new one. I don't know exactly how. It could be through a catastrophic war. It could be through some gradual reforms. But either way, you want to make sure that it's going in a direction that we can feel okay about. And if you want to move the world in a good direction, then you probably should have a good ideological framework so that you can push the status quo towards that framework. We live in a post-truth society where emotional appeal has become more important than actual facts. And for some reason, deep within me, I find a great joy in that knowledge. It's not just a desperate attempt to rationalize the terror of reality and the terror of the future with a framework that actually turns that terror into something positive. It does bring me joy. And after making it my career and watching truth deteriorate further and further as we descend into echo chambers of madness, it makes me even happier. I am filled with joy. I am filled with joy so much that it is the only thing that brings me joy. Watching chaos, watching society unravel, watching what is built be torn down, that is the only thing that brings me joy. Today, I renounce my humanity. I embrace chaos. I am no longer a person. Now, I am simply an idea. Oh, whoops, I actually misread the description of neoliberalism. See, neoliberalism is actually anything I don't like. The more I dislike it, the more neoliberal it is. Great. In fact, let me use it in a sentence for you. Ah, dang, I stubbed my toe. Fucking neoliberalism.